Antifa firebombing in Tacoma inspired by AOC's reckless comparison of the border crisis to concentration camps and the Holocaust. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about, sadly, again, AOC. She compared the border crisis and illegal immigrant detention centers that are used to house people pending hearings and prior to deportation to Nazi concentration camps and the Holocaust, where millions were murdered. Frankly, there is no comparison, but because she made the comparison, now Antifa, they're the so-called anti-fascists. They think they're fighting Nazis in America. They're not, but they just firebombed an ICE facility in Tacoma, Washington, and this is what's happening now because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez foolishly and recklessly compares what's going on here in the United States to Nazi Germany and the conditions in the concentration camps, and there is basically no comparison. It's a very, very foolish, misguided, and frankly ignorant comparison to be making, but here we are. This is America 2019, and we're having this conversation. First, let's start with the attack. This man, Willem Van Spronsen, he was shot dead by police after firebombing an ICE detention center, and we'll read a little bit here. Early Saturday morning, Willem Van Spronsen on Vashon Island returned to the Northwest Detention Center, the holding facility for the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, this time armed with a rifle and incendiary devices, according to Tacoma police. Police said Van Spronsen tossed lit objects at vehicles and buildings, causing one car fire, and unsuccessfully tried to ignite a propane tank. Officers were called to by an ICE employee who saw the rifle. Soon after they arrived, officers reported shots fired, and Van Spronsen was dead. And so you have a terrorist attack here now by Antifa that's inspired by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. How do we know that? Well, Jack Posobiec, OAN, he's reporting on the ICE bombers manifesto that you can find on his Twitter account at Jack Posobiec. And some excerpts say, quote, "Evil says concentration camps for folks deemed lesser are necessary. The handmaid of evil says the concentration camps should be more humane. This is a call to patriots, too, to stand against this travesty, against everything that you hold sacred. I know you. I know that in your hearts you see the dishonor in these camps. Here it is, in these corporate for-profit concentration camps. Detention centers are an abomination. I'm not standing by." So he tried to blow it up. The attack, again, it seems that he's echoing Ocasio-Cortez. She said on June 18th that the administration has established concentration camps on the southern border of the U.S. for immigrants, where they are brutalized with dehumanizing conditions and dying. So she's referring to Nazi concentration camps, but she's really trivializing the scale of death of the Holocaust and the conditions at the Nazi camps. I mean, for starters, as if nobody died in the concentration camps. Jews were not merely killed at the death camps. This might not be widely understood, so we're gonna walk through this. The amount of people is anywhere from 15 to 20 million people perished in the Holocaust. They were murdered. 6 million Jews, 7 million Soviet civilians, 3 million Soviet prisoners of war, 1.8 million non-Jewish Polish civilians, 300,000 Serbs, up to 250,000 people with disabilities, over 200,000 gypsies, about 2,000 Jehovah's Witnesses were killed. Repeat criminal offenders were also killed, 70,000. Homosexual, hundreds, possibly thousands. This is according to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. And so I think that there's no comparison. That's not what immigrant detention centers do. That's not what happens to people in federal custody. And to make that comparison, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is inviting criticism, and she's also inspiring acts of domestic terrorism now. I think that we should be careful with our rhetoric. Making comparisons to Nazi Germany are often going to be inaccurate, and they're going to really, I mean, you can criticize the immigrant detention facilities. You can say this is a bad policy, or I don't agree with that. We should let everyone in. We should have open borders. I mean, those are all opinions that don't require us to demonize federal law enforcement as being Einsatzgruppen, but they're not SS. I mean, it's just a horrible comparison. I mean, people were routinely killed at the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. Often they were temporary housing for people on their way to the extermination facilities in Poland. Ocasio-Cortez is making it sound like the concentration camps were safe for people who lived in them compared to those sent to death camps. But it's a false distinction. Almost everyone who got sent to a camp in Nazi Germany during the war died. Like 97% of them died. I mean, you're talking about 20 million people. How many? We don't know how many people truly died. The mortality rates were through the roof, and the truth is we don't know how many perished because the Nazis were incinerating the bodies afterwards. So they were covering up their crimes. So we really don't know. But we do know how many survived. The SS kept pretty accurate records at the time. As of January 1945, there were over 700,000 people in camps, according to the SS. We know about 200,000 of them died in death marches in the spring of 45, leaving about 500,000 survivors. But about 10% of those would die. About 50,000 would die from disease shortly after being liberated. Another 12,500 committed suicide. So maybe 430,000 or so survived the Holocaust. So out of upwards of 20 million, maybe 2.25% survived. That's over 97% mortality rate. And not everyone made it to the camps. The SS murdered, shot dead with their mobile killing squads of 2 million people, Jews mostly, and just filled up mass graves with them. The scale of death was unimaginable. It was horrible, and it's not at all what happens in the United States. This just doesn't happen here. Just for comparison's sakes, you've had since the beginning of the Trump administration, you've had about 1.4 million people have been apprehended on the southern border. And of that number, about 24 people have died. So the mortality rate then falls to 0.0017, less than 1% of people in custody who are apprehended on the southern border are dying, meaning more than 99.8% of people are living. So that's decidedly different from what happened in the Holocaust and at concentration camps. There were many different kinds of camps during the Nazi era. Concentration camps, according to the U.S. Holocaust Museum, are often inaccurately compared to a prison in modern society, but concentration camps, unlike prisons, were independent of any judicial review. Nazi concentration camps served three main purposes: to incarcerate people whom the Nazi regime perceived to be a security threat, to eliminate individuals and small targeted groups of individuals by murder away from public and judicial review, and to exploit forced labor of the prisoner population. And people were often worked to death. When they couldn't work anymore, they were disposed of. People were murdered in the concentration camps too. I mean, you didn't have to get shipped to Auschwitz to be murdered. People were being murdered all over the place. 97% of people who went through these camps are dead. They didn't survive. The only ones we know about are the survivors, for certain. And we're talking about up to 20 million people. Federal and state prisons. I mean, it's the same situation. I mean, yes, there are deaths in prisons. Out of 1.56 million people, in 2014, 3,927 deaths occurred. But most of those are illness related, suicides or drug and alcohol overdoses, that sort of thing. Just 83 were determined to be homicides, or about 2% of the deaths. And so, again, this is the prison system. And U.S. Holocaust Museum often inaccurately compares people often inaccurately compare prisons to concentration camps, and there's just no comparison. People are sent to concentration camps to be murdered, to be experimented on. I mean, the crimes that were against humanity that were committed there were just unbelievable. They were exterminating the Jews. They were trying to wipe them off the face of the earth so that nobody would know about them. It was horrific what occurred. And for AOC to just cavalierly compare what's happening, the border crisis, there is a crisis on the southern border, but it's not because of the Border Patrol apprehending people. No, it's because people are making a very dangerous journey through Mexico from Central America. They're fleeing drought conditions. And you've had a flood of people coming into the U.S. 104,000 in June, 144,000 in May, 109,000 in April, 76,000 in February, 58,000 in January. You see the huge spike here in 2019. And it's well above the norm. I mean, you're double and triple the amounts that you see on a normal basis. 40, 50,000 in a normal month will be apprehended. And so you've got a flood of people coming to the United States who are illegal immigrants. Many are seeking asylum, but they are not. They probably won't get adjudicated in their favor, and not because they're not good people or whatever. It's because they don't qualify under U.S. asylum laws, and those laws are going to be enforced. And what are people objecting to? Enforcement. They don't want anyone to be apprehended. They just want open borders. Just let everyone in. Millions of people will come here. We can't accommodate them all. And that's not what our immigration system is all about. But to compare immigration enforcement to the Holocaust and concentration camps is utterly outrageous, deranged, and twisted. Like, I can't believe Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went to school in the New York State education system, which is pretty good. I went to New York State school, and you know what? We learned about the Holocaust, and we learned about how horrible it was, and we wouldn't make these comparisons lightly. I think that it's dangerous to do so. It's resulting in political violence. People are bombing ICE detention centers now. Antifa is being inspired, and they're getting an excuse. You have members of Congress who are making these comparisons, and then when you look at their manifestos, they're saying, yeah, those are concentration camps. We're stopping Nazis. They're not fighting Nazis. People who fought in World War II, the United States, the Soviets, they fought Nazis. They liberated the concentration camps. And these people who are committing these acts of terrorism are not fighting fascism. They're something else. They're extremists, and we shouldn't take them seriously. We should not take Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez seriously, except to denounce her and say that her rhetoric is dangerous, and it's going to inspire further attacks, more political violence against. You're going to have attacks against government facilities now. After she made this ridiculous comparison in the first place, I was predicting that there would be more political violence, and I understated the matter. Now, you actually know it's inspiring terrorist attacks. They're blowing up. They're trying to blow up ICE facilities. So I underestimated what the impact would be, but I knew there would be violence. And it's just a horrible comparison. I mean, Ocasio-Cortez, you know what she should do? She should go to the Holocaust Museum. It's actually pretty close to the U.S. Capitol here. If 27 minutes, she can walk from the U.S. Capitol over to the Holocaust Museum and learn about what real concentration camps were all about. About 1.3 miles, she can get her steps in, I guess. But in the meantime, we have important business to attend to in Congress. There is a crisis on the southern border, but AOC, she's not making it any better. And people are just they're too busy fighting with President Trump on Twitter, and making these stupid comparisons. And saying racist things, really. I mean, the spat between Trump and a few members of Congress It's not without merit. Trump is denouncing people who are comparing the United States to Nazi Germany, who are saying that the Holocaust gives them common feelings, that Jewish money controls Congress. I mean, the statements are just utterly out of control, and people really should consider their rhetoric, I think, in the public square more carefully. These are, these times are rife with extremism. We're seeing domestic terrorism now, and it shouldn't be happening here, but it's going to continue happening if members of Congress are reluctant to condemn acts of terrorism. In fact, Ocasio-Cortez has not denounced the terrorist act here. Here's a video from BLN News. Let's take a gander here.
Back in Washington, it's easy to condemn a terrorist attack.
So there she is. She won't condemn the attack. She has an issue. Oh wait, there's 2 new tweets here. Let's see if she condemned the attack yet. Nope, she's talking about huge tech companies. She wants to talk about Facebook. Okay, she's not. She hasn't issued any statements on her website since February. So there's no statements here. You know, when James Hodgkinson shot up a congressional baseball practice, was shooting at Republicans who were practicing for the congressional baseball game, and he was a Bernie Sanders supporter. You know what Bernie Sanders did? He denounced it, like, immediately. He said Sanders of supporter and alleged shooter. Violence of any kind is unacceptable. I mean, it would take like 5 seconds to utter these words. And to walk back her statement about concentration camps, but she can't get off that pedestal. I guess she's more concerned about her credibility and politics than she is about preventing violence. I mean, when somebody does something in your name that you disagree with, like commit political violence, try to shoot a bunch of members of Congress, blow up ICE facilities, I think that members of Congress should be denouncing it. And then clearly her rhetoric about concentration camps could have inspired this attack. So I think that I'm not saying she's responsible for the attack, but she should be checking herself. She should be considering her rhetoric and making certain that this doesn't happen again. And denouncing it would be, and denouncing Antifa, which is engaged in political violence, would be a good way to do that. And unfortunately, that's not what's happening here. And now you're getting political violence and domestic terrorism as a result. So I'll leave you with the close here. Why have Ocasio-Cortez and her colleagues in Congress feuding with President Trump on Twitter refuse to denounce this violence, this act of terrorism? When will she stop making these insane comparisons? It is shocking that in just 2 years after the congressional baseball practice shooting, that political violence is now apparently become acceptable to the woke, radical left wing of the Democratic Party in Congress. I know this doesn't represent most Democrats. I'm not denouncing all Democrats. I think that most people deplore violence against police officers, federal law enforcement, immigrations and customs enforcement, the Border Patrol, anybody who's working for the government, risking their lives and trying to keep America safe. They don't deserve these comparisons. They're not running concentration camps. They're keeping America safe, and they're enforcing the law. That's what they're supposed to do. And we shouldn't be condoning political violence and acts of terrorism, and stop comparing the American government, the federal government, to Nazi Germany. It's not even close. It's not even the same universe. That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.